Yeah, man. Yeah. Rock on, Jason. Rock on. All right, folks on IG, please tune in to ConcernedDabsPodcast.com or check us out on YouTube. Search ConcernedDabsPodcast.com. Thank you guys for tuning in.
We live? I think we're live.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the seventh podcast, the seventh episode of the Concerned Dabs podcast. I am your host, Katie M. Kane. With me is my co-host, Will Terps.
Yo, yo.
All right. So our guest tonight is Jason Ortiz, who is the vice president of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. Yeah, he's out there is it Connecticut right now?
A bit and spend a good amount of time in Puerto Rico too.
Yeah, he's about that Puerto Rico rebuild life too, man.
I am.
He's active. He's active. All right. So, Will, I wanted you to try and give a little bit of a do this weekend, man. You got to work somewhere cool and do some fun stuff as far as cannabis industry goes.
Yeah, definitely. So this weekend I attended the Homegrown Maine event in Augusta, Maine, which is basically a home growers convention. Super cool venue, super cool setup. I was working the Dynasty Genetics booth. As we were selling seeds, to the lovely people of Maine. And yeah, it was just really good vibes. It was definitely a different setting than what I'm used to with like the Oregon events. Kind of lately, there's been a kind of like, it's always been there, but more prominently an ego drive that I've seen at a lot of the events in Oregon. Just kind of people, measuring dick sizes, if you will. And I didn't get that vibe at all when I was at the home growers convention in Maine. A lot of people, just modest people trying to, get better at growing, looking for tips, looking for new genetics. And yeah, it was two awesome days. Professor P also launched his new project, which is Relic Seeds, kind of like a sister company almost to Dynasty Genetics. He does both the breeding and growing, obviously, and it's kind of focusing more on like old school genetics, older world genetics. He's got a lot of skunk and cheese crosses he's working with
on Relic,
and yeah, on Relic, yeah.
I'm gonna look that shit up, man.
Yeah, and he's got some like old school G13 haze.
Yummy.
Yeah, so some really good stuff he's been working on. So that was cool. Just a different perspective from a lot of the Oregon events and people I've met.
Very cool, man. I'm a fan of that guy's work. The moose and lobster, that was my favorite shit that I ran outdoors from him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what people always ask for in Maine, because that's the main strain, moose and lobster.
Yeah.
Got that question probably like 30 times at the booth this weekend. Like, oh, where's the moose and lobster?
So you guys didn't have that? You guys didn't have that on deck this weekend?
No, we had some two new ones, but they're offshoots of the moose and lobster, like same parent, just different combinations, I guess. So
okay. What were they called?
It's Limeberry Mega and Ocelot.
Ocelot. That's a cool name.
What is an ocelot?
Ocelot. I just remember that. I don't know, honestly.
Isn't that was like a Mac update was called Ocelot, I think. Yeah.
It's some kind of animal, right?
Yeah, because it was like tiger, and then it was like lion, and it was like snow tiger, and then I remember Ocelot was one of them too, I think. That's awesome, dude. Well, it sounds like you had a good time, man.
Definitely, yeah. It was a great time for sure.
Cool. All right, so I feel like that's a good enough intro. 5 minutes. Let's get down to asking Jason some questions. It's a little bit late
Sure.
over there. So I kind of already did an intro, but I'd like you to introduce yourself. My first cookie cutter question is, can you please state your name, location, and the company you work for and the work that you do?
Sure. So my name is Jason Ortiz. I'm currently in Connecticut, and I don't work for the Minority Cannabis Business Association, but I do a lot of work for MCBA. And so it is a volunteer basis, but I'm the vice president, and I'm also the chair of the policy committee. And so I oversee all of our decisions and also drafting of model policy or positions that we take on various bills that come out at any level of government. And so I am not a lawyer, but I know how to get lawyers in the room together to draft legislation to help people of color get into the industry. Because right now, very small percentage of folks are people of color that own actual businesses in the industry. And so we want to increase that number and figure out how we can start to develop our own internal economics to be able to support each other and not necessarily have to rely on the big corporate players to finance everything.
Yes, dude, I dig everything that you are saying right now. I am a person of color
Absolutely.
within the
Yeah.
cannabis industry, and it was very difficult for me to solicit any sort of investment. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have like
Mm-hmm.
any kind of programs that are grant style or anything, like, dude, I really want to check those out, especially if I can establish position in a state that isn't as flooded as Oregon is right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm digging what you're saying, man. I'm digging it a lot.
Well, it's easier said than done. I mean, we can say we want to be able to fight Goliath one on one, but it is a struggle. And so we want to make sure we're bringing people together. Like our biggest strength is that the cannabis community as a community is huge and very diverse and has all kinds of different skill sets involved. And so we do have a wide variety of people to pull from to help us out to get things done. And so that's something that the corporations don't have, right? Like the actual culture supports people working together. And so we're fortunate, at least, that we get to bring people together for things like our policy summits to discuss what laws are in our interests and like what does equity mean to us at this point in time. At various points in the last few years, that's changed, right? And so whether or not home grow is included has been a big issue the last couple of years. If we consider home grow part of the equity side of things, even something as what I would have thought was definitely part of equity, the community investment part. Some folks feel like it confuses the issue to have them both labeled as equity. So even just coming together to have consensus of like what do we think these words mean has been a huge help to building community together, so we know what we're fighting for together.
I agree, man. Every time that there's an update to the laws in Oregon, whether it's medical or recreational, the first thing that they post is the definitions of the terms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's,
Absolutely.
like it was really vague. There was a lot of gray area to work with when it was medical, but now it's very, very specific, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it caused a lot of extractors
Oh yeah.
problems. You know what I
And
mean?
the
Because it's
difference
like,
in a couple words can change the whole bill, right? Like something is may versus shall, right? Like that could be a big difference. If they
yes,
say you may invest in our communities versus shall, that's a huge difference in the law. That quite frankly, our organizations would probably pull out their support for a bill just based on that one word.
yeah.
Because it's whether or not we are going to hold the government and industry accountable to what the promises they make or not. And so we have to make sure that we are actually doing that. And that means sometimes you have to withdraw support for shitty laws.
Yeah, dude, exactly. So I'm gonna skip around a little bit, but so technically you're like a lobbyist, right?
So it's a little complicated. Technically, no, I'm not a lobbyist because I don't get
Okay.
paid to lobby. And
Well,
so
well,
if,
I
if
mean,
I
you're
was making more money doing it, then yes, technically. So really, I'm a citizen lobbyist. And so being a lobbyist is a very technical thing. And so you have to disclose what types of funding you're getting, what bills you're working on. And that is a whole other complicated world. But what I do, I'm a grassroots community organizer, is really what I am. And so it just happens to be we spend time in capitals pressuring elected officials, which is lobbying. And so, but I don't have to wear a little badge, I don't have to disclose my finances or anything like that. I just need to turn up the heat whenever I can, as much as possible, to get folks to do something. And so it's more work outside of the Capitol than it really is inside the Capitol. And I think there's a big difference between myself and a lobbyist. But I do find myself lobbying frequently, right? If you go and just lobby
Yeah.
folks in DC, for
You're
instance,
lobbying
like that
for
counts.
the good guys, for the right reasons,
Yes, yeah,
dude. Like
yeah,
that's why I dig
absolutely.
your approach. You're doing it because you believe in it, because it's
Hmm.
righteous.
Hmm. And because I was arrested, quite frankly, right? So like, well, how I got pulled into the drug policy movement was when I was 16. I was arrested for smoking weed on the way to school and got suspended for 45 school days and had to go through this whole big court process. And I was only 16 years old, and so I didn't really know what was happening or what all this was about. But I had 45 days off of school to do, what you probably would imagine a 16-year-old would do. I smoked a lot of weed and went on the internet and looked
Yeah.
up the laws of everything that was just affecting me. And so that's when I learned about the war on drugs, the school to prison pipeline, and things like selective enforcement, where not everybody gets punished equally for certain laws. And it may not be that the law is poorly written, or just the folks that are implementing the laws have their own biases. And so learning that I was getting caught up in this bigger war on drugs enlightened me to, not all laws are just, not all laws are made with good intention. But all laws can be changed, and so that experience kind of put me into the activist, lobbyist, organizer role.
Dude, same thing, man. I caught a felony possession of marijuana charge senior year of college, and it's like I was still allowed to
Yeah.
graduate, but I still had to sit 30 days in jail after I
Mm-hmm.
graduated, and
Mm-hmm.
that charge still pops up when you search my name on a computer. So as far as corporate jobs go with a
Mm-hmm.
degree or anything like that wasn't real for me, and so I got
Mm-hmm.
to wear
Mm-hmm.
that shit on my sleeve too. It's like, yeah, I'm a weed guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you a whole lot about it and the industry and everything. So that's what makes me kind of activist too, dude. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Well,
don't
yeah,
think
and
that
that's
I should
why
be treated that
MCB.
way just for weed.
Right, for a plant, right, for a dried plant.
Yeah.
And so, that's why MCBA exists. And so one, misconception about equity is actually that it's generally race-based, and it's actually usually not race-based. And so it's more whether you've had an interaction with the criminal justice system or you've been in an area that was over policed, and that actually tends to be more about class and money than just race, but of course race plays a part of it. And so we believe as MCBA, and also I'm the Connecticut chapter, the Connecticut group I'm working with is CURE, Connecticut United for Reform and Equity. And, we say anyone that has been impacted by the criminal justice system related to cannabis should qualify as an equity applicant. And so we think that because we're admitting that the government did something wrong, and like really wrong, and they need to make it better, that the way that we can do that is by, investing in entrepreneurship and community investment for folks that have been impacted. And that could be interested in your white, black, brown, male, female, whatever it may be. You should get the front of the line for these licenses, because as we're seeing it, it's the big corporations that are trying to block everybody else out and say, oh, only if you're already a business owner can you get a new business, a rec business, which is ridiculous, but that's what's happening all over the country. And so we say, no, not so fast. Like, actually, we want all of our communities included in that economic boom that you're creating right now. And it's very upsetting that some people would actually be for legalization, but not if we help people that got arrested before. And so they're happy to make it $1 billion for someone who already has $1 billion, but for the dude that got arrested for a 20 bag and is in jail right now, not that guy. That guy shouldn't be able to make any money, And so it's wild,
Yes.
how this is playing out, and we have to make sure that as a community, we slow it down to the point where we're included in the process. And there's been a lot of bills pushed that folks might say are narrow, right, and it's by
Yeah.
narrow they mean only including their friends, and narrowing out us. And so that's been coming up quite a bit also.
Yeah, dude. Barriers to entry, you know, like rough.
Absolutely. I mean, governments are deciding that they're just going to make the fees $75,000 non-refundable deposit plus $1 million in the bank, right? Like, that's just a choice they're making to exclude 99% of the population.
Yeah, dude. It man, serious. And then the whole banking thing too
Mm-hmm.
is like, even if you're a person of color and you have impeccable credit, you pay your bills on time. So
Right.
you make 45, 50 a year, you
Yeah.
still can't go in and you can't go and apply for a business
No.
loan to start
No.
a cannabis
And
business.
not
Bank's
like
not going to
a
give you that.
manufacturing license of cannabis, right? I mean, like, or anything. If I was going to try to buy a property and produce chocolate bars, it'd be pretty difficult for me to do that.
Yeah. And like, dude, I'm telling you, like in 2015, 2016, if I could apply for a loan, I would have, but I was trying to meet any millionaire who wanted to sit down with me for 10 minutes. I had my little spiral notebook with all my spreadsheets and everything. It just was really difficult. It was hard to make that happen. It would have been a lot easier, I feel, to get a regular loan like the one I got for going to college or anything like that. But it's barrier to entry, man. Like you can't.
Yeah, and it's on
You know,
purpose.
yeah, it
That I
is.
mean
It's
that
by
it happens
design.
in other industries too, where they do make it more difficult on purpose to keep out competition. And so
Yeah,
legalization isn't gonna make capitalism disappear, right? And so like it is still being legalized into a capitalist society. So all the same pressures that we see in every other industry are going to apply to cannabis as well. It's just the community and the culture attached to cannabis is different, than a lot of other industries. It is a group that has been brought together through oppression, right? Like we empathize with each other because we've gone through struggles, and that's not the same in every other industry, but some it is, right? Like farmers definitely have had, mutual struggles and have had to figure out things over the years, in various centuries throughout time. And so there are similar situations, but we're the one that's really changing society right now and figuring out how to do it. And it's a little different. Like, yes, food is very, very important, but helping your mental health as a society is dramatic how it will change things once we end prohibition on self-medication essentially.
yeah, no doubt. Okay, so my next cookie cutter question. It says I checked out your guys' website, the Minority Cannabis Business Association. Can you
Mm-hmm.
say that URL? It was Minority Cannabis Business or minoritycannabis.org. Is that what it was?
minoritycannabis.org is the website. Yep.
Okay, so if anybody's listening right now, you can go and check that out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Minoritycannabis.org. On one of the links, it had a list of your guys' various outreach techniques. Can you talk
Mm-hmm.
about that for a minute? Like some of the stuff that you guys do to reach the community?
Sure. I mean, there's been a lot of different things over the years. And so I'll say, we have a working board. So a lot of our projects and programs usually come through a board member that wants to take on a big role for something and then works with one of our member partners to make it bigger and better. And so, I mean, we've done expungement events, we've done opportunity summits where we had one in Denver that brought different business owners in to basically explain like how they got started and what they think folks can learn from what they've done so far. And then we also, have a number of policy summits, which is one of the programs that I run that are from various activists and legal backgrounds to come together to talk about what they think is in our best interests. And then we've just held a number of networking events all across the country. We're present in numerous conferences in different areas. Like we've most recently participated in the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists conference, and that was amazing. And so to be able to get in some of these spaces that aren't cannabis specific and be the person that talks about cannabis in a rational way for the first time,
Yeah,
it's
man.
been very helpful. Yeah, for sure.
Way
And
to go, dude.
and
Way to
and
go.
there was some real conversations that needed to be had with journalists because journalists like to sensationalize the topic, and it's kind of funny because they had a very specific question about the strain green crack, and like what is
Yeah.
this, and like what are you guys doing, like is this a new type of drug that you guys are creating? It's like, no, it's just a strain, it's a really good sativa actually, but and
Yeah.
so they still had
Daytime
a little
smoke.
bit of that kind of fear right about the plant, but it was in a space that we could talk about it honestly, and I think they were very interested by the end of the day. So it was a good combination of groups coming together to talk about cannabis. And so we've done a lot of, there's the educational side of it, there's the policy side of it, and then we need to organize more of these. But we've done a number of medical summits where we try to get patients to come in, diagnose, and see what what type of cannabis would help them the most. And so we have a number of doctors on staff on our board. Actually, Dr. Rachel Knox, who's out in Oregon, is on our board, and she's fantastic. And so,
awesome,
yeah, she's great, and she's actually going to have a really important TED talk about homeostasis and the endocannabinoid system coming out pretty soon.
Oh, man, can you please send us that link so we can share it on our social media too?
For sure. Yep. And so, I was in Puerto Rico not too long ago, and so we held a big networking event there that ended up with a party on the beach because it's Puerto Rico. So it's everything from very legal work to networking on the beach in Puerto Rico, and so we want to keep it as diverse as we can. But it really is, when folks join MCBA, they can take initiative on a different project, and we can make it great. And so I think that's what's been so far. So MCBA can make the flame a little bigger for you.
Awesome, dude. So you were able to are they going medical in Puerto Rico or something? You were talking about weed down there too?
So they already have medical in Puerto Rico. There's actually more cannabis opportunity in Puerto Rico than there is in Connecticut. And so I'm going to be working on getting a cultivation and manufacturing license in Puerto Rico.
Oh,
they
dude,
have about
30,000. Man, I want to get down, bro.
I know, dream come true, right?
Can I send you my resume? Like,
absolutely,
shit.
Yes. I mean, I got to go get the land first, but that's the next step, is to find the location. And so, yeah, definitely.
Dude,
and Puerto Rico is open, right? They want folks to come.
That's tight, bro.
Yeah.
Because everything more or less got leveled by the hurricane, right? So they need new businesses to come and start up or something.
Correct. I mean, it was not in a great shape before the hurricane happened, and there's a lot of political issues with being a colony and what that means for your economic development. And so I have political reasons why I want to the island and help organize there. But one of the only industries that is growing after the hurricane is the cannabis industry. And so there's 30,000 patients in Puerto Rico, but they also have reciprocity, which means that any patient from another state can use their card in PR to get medicine.
No way. You can grab from a store too?
No, I mean, you still have to go to a dispensary.
That's what I meant though. Like if I go to Puerto Rico with my Arizona medical card, I can go to a dispensary in Puerto Rico and get medicine.
Yep.
Dude,
and buy it instantly. Yep. And so when you have a country that has so much tourism, right? Like, that is a huge market. Like, there's going to be more patients that come through tourism that live on the island, and so it's awesome. I mean, like, the cultivators run out of product all the time, and it's a place I want to be, both politically and cannabis economics. Hey, I mean, it's what we should all be trying to do, right? Is like go back to our homelands and grab some of that land from the corporations and employ people to do good work. And everywhere you are, that's what I would tell you to do one way or another. I think cultivation versus manufacturing versus retail is its own conversation, but there ain't nothing wrong with going and making sure that the cannabis that's grown in your homeland is grown by your homies and not some random corporation from Canada or something.
And with righteous methods too, without spraying a bunch of chemicals that are going to harm people. Yeah.
right, exactly. He probably has shitty weed. Like,
he does. He definitely grows mids. He probably grows a whole room of fucking like train wreck or something. It's
dude.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't like it. I mean, that's what drove me to start growing. On a personal level, was just like I didn't have the stuff that I was looking for, and so like I'm a very sativa centric, and so I enjoy indicas at parties, but I have a lot of work to do. I can't be smoking indicas all day. But so on the market is a lot of indicas in the black market, and so I had to figure out what I was going to do to get my hazes and my diesels that I needed to get shit done. And so that's what I think we should be doing whenever folks get in the industry, right? Is like go back, grab a piece of the pie so that your people will get their foot in the door in the industry. And then, at that point, it's about advocacy and growing the industry as a whole to be able to provide more good for more people.
Yeah. Well, because I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and Arizona also reciprocates other states' medical cards, but you cannot go to a dispensary and grab medicine. You can possess, Like you can fly in with, and
Oh.
the limit is 2.5 ounces. So it's like you can fly in with 2.5 zips and get pulled over as long as you got your card from whatever state you're from. It's cool, but
Huh.
they won't
But
let us go
they
anymore.
won't let you. That seems like it's unfortunate for your cannabis industry then.
Yeah, well, because
It's
I've
forcing folks to buy it outside, and then
exactly, dude. That's my problem. That's my problem. Is like, come on, man. Like, you guys gotta let us grow our own too. Like,
right,
my
yeah.
honesty, when I go to the stores out here, it's just not the same as Oregon. The quality of the product is not
For
the same,
sure.
and the level of knowledge in the staff is not the same. And
No.
I feel like that's the difference, man. Is people aren't allowed to cultivate down here. If every
Mm-hmm.
patient, it doesn't matter. Like you can, I tell people, ain't nothing to it but to do it. You know what I mean? Like it's dirt,
Yeah,
water, and light. You're growing a plant. That's it. You're gonna either grow it really good or
it's a
really
little
bad or
more
somewhere in the
complicated
middle.
than that, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, because you could buy clones in Oregon from pretty much
Mm,
every store that I worked at. We had clones on the shelf, so any patient could come in and buy their own
mhm.
clones and go and grow them themselves. And
Yeah, yeah,
I feel like that um, it makes people read more into the research of how to cultivate, and I feel like
sure.
that just makes the market better and the products better. And I feel like that's the difference in Oregon, man. Like everybody is really safety oriented. You
Mm,
know, the organic and no-till indoor movement and everything in Oregon and Washington. I haven't really seen it the same in other states. So I feel like that's the difference. Is if people are allowed to, that's where they'll gravitate towards. You know.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're doing it all indoor now too. Like all the states that come online, like we're not using the sun, which changes, what we need to do and facilities, and we have like facilities trying to put solar panels on the roof to power lights for an indoor grow, and we could just put stuff outside. And so
Yeah,
like there's all
I
kinds of
agree.
And
all
let's
kinds
also
of
not
weird things.
Yeah, let's also not forget that Oregon, going back to that, opened at the last second, opened the floodgates to out of staters. People, they were going to keep it to only residents of Oregon. Getting the first crack at recreational
Mm,
licenses, and then
mm-hmm.
at the last second, they opened the floodgates to anyone. And
Yeah,
like
probably
you
because
saying
some
earlier,
people
that
with
just
big pockets. Yeah.
that just allows your fucking Chad and Brads to come in
Yep.
tenfold and fucking,
Hmm.
you
Flood the
know,
market.
flood the market. Exactly. And it's just super
I mean,
disappointing
it's
that
yeah.
they, seemingly like Oregon was going to do it the correct way, and then the last second, like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. But I'm always worried about bills, man, because you can have the best bill ever, but then at the last minute they put some amendment on it, and oh
yeah,
no, we're taking all the good stuff. Everywhere it says good, just put bad in, and then we'll pass that instead.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking
Well,
A,
and I mean,
dude.
it's the corporate model though, right? So it's like also like Walmart's and things will come in, create a big amount of product, drop prices, put everybody else out of business, and then bring the prices back up again. And so, this is a something that happens all the time. And so, folks, we saw it coming. Some of us saw it coming that that the corporations were gonna do this. And so, we're trying to
Right,
put some kind of protections, slow it down a little bit, in order to
right,
let
right.
people that are currently doing it have a real opportunity here, and not just McDonald's and Jim Beam. And so, like,
Yeah,
we have these huge corporations like Canopy and Acreage, and I believe it's Acreage. I sometimes get them mixed up. Is like 30% owned by the Jim Beam family, and so it's like
Damn.
it's really hard in Oregon to compete with the alcohol distribution cartel that we have now in producing cannabis if they can just drop millions of dollars and lose it, because they can invest hundreds of millions and lose all of it if they know that it's going to put all the small growers out of business because it's a bigger number down the road. We can't compete with that, right? And so we have to keep them out or limit how
yep,
much they can grow, right? Because if you're going to be from out of state, all right, well, tell them 1,000 square feet max,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so there's ways to do it, right? There's policy ways to ensure everybody gets a piece of it and gets their foot in the door. And so what's really frustrating to me is the legislators that claim we just don't know how to do things, right? When we definitely know how to do it. Every issue that has come up with cannabis, the cannabis community has a solid answer to. And so
Hell
it's this
yeah,
sticking
dude.
our head in the sand approach that is so frustrating because they can't even have an honest conversation about things because they don't want to know how to do it. And
Yeah.
that's where we're at in a lot of legislatures, is that the reps writing on the walls but don't want to be the ones to, I don't know, like put their name on progress, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
A tough conversation, right? Because on one hand, you have millionaires that bottleneck the industry for their own benefit. And on the other hand, you have, folks that are just still in reefer madness mode. And, somehow the legislators find the way to get the worst of both of those worlds onto their positions.
Yeah, dude, man, what you're saying is so on point, dude. Like it's totally like that.
Because I've been mad about it for a long time.
Well, bro, just moving to Arizona, it's like, yeah, it's medical, but it's still a red state, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I like?
Yeah.
Like if like neighbors still call the cops on you for
Right,
smoking weed.
right,
You know what
right.
I mean? I'm just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Like you're not being bothered. Like, yeah, you can enjoy it.
Right.
You can also
Yeah,
smoke your neighbor's cigarette burning, like it's not, I don't understand. It makes me mad too, Jason. It makes me mad too.
Exactly. Good. It should make everyone mad. It should get us to go out there and kick ass and keep fighting, because we're not there yet. Like, we are clearly making progress, and public opinion has shifted. And while there are those people that will still call the cops on you for smoking weed on your porch, most people won't. And especially most young folks, it's kind of beyond it really being an issue. And so every year, the younger people get older and older people die off, and we get closer to having a better world. And so we just gotta,
I agree.
keep
I'm
pushing and
like,
make sure
man.
folks that care, are putting themselves in decision-making positions. Like, as these older retire, somebody's got to fill those roles, and it should be folks that understand that prohibition doesn't work and how to fix it. And so I hope that all the cannabis entrepreneurs and activists, that are watching this, consider running for office, consider drafting your own laws, creating organizations to help people run or oppose people or just attack. You can also just take people out, which is a fun part of politics. But
I like shitting on people I don't like. Yeah.
Because I also run
this guy.
campaigns,
Here's why.
professionally. Yeah. Right. And this person didn't vote for cannabis, but he denied our community's economic development, and I have a plan, right? I think the one big strong point for our community is that we actually do have a very concrete plan for how to bring both tax revenue and jobs to communities, right? Like, very specifically. And most candidates don't. Like, most candidates will say they can do different things, but they really don't.
Dude.
Yeah, and the thing with the war on drugs, but it's not even just economic development, right? It's criminal justice reform, it's mental health and medical, reducing costs for our medical costs, right? So, like, if you legalize opiate use, not even addiction, but just use for the elderly, drops significantly, and that actually will save our insurance companies, like our insurance premiums, money as a state. So if you can imagine, right, a state that has 100,000 public sector workers, their costs for healthcare as a total group are dramatic. And so reducing that by 10 or 20%, we're talking millions and millions of dollars. And so that millions and millions of dollars means we could be hiring teachers and building schools, or fixing our roads, or putting people to work for various things. And so making sure we're not just talking about it in cents and pennies, but also what do those pennies mean for our community? Because that's where people will be able to see better how cannabis benefits them. That it's not just people get to smoke, but our society will be safer. Our communities will be more likely to want to work together, and neighbors not calling the cops on people, right? Once we get past this. And so, there's lots of reasons to do it. And I'm preaching to the choir, of course, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for anyone that's currently involved, both to get in the industry for sure, but also in the advocacy world, to help us design the laws we need to make sure that we can be a part of it.
Yeah. So I want to change the conversation to Colorado for a second. I posted an article that some sort of community recreational center that's got like basketball courts and swimming pool and all that stuff, just off of cannabis revenue.
Yep. They also invest a ton of money to help in Colorado too.
And so I thought that was super cool, but I also, pertaining to regulation, I posted an article maybe like a week ago on the Concerned Dabs Facebook profile.
Mm-hmm.
Denver, and it wasn't just Denver, it was like throughout the whole state. They did a shit ton of raids
Yo,
on
okay,
on
so
unlicensed growers. You know what I
oh
mean? And
man,
when
I'm
I
gonna have
posted
to
the
write this
article,
on
I
the
was
side.
like, I thought that the voters said that this was a waste of budget. Like I can imagine that, and it was like I want to say three figures, like in the hundreds of people that they raided and took all their shit,
Yep,
and you know what I mean, gave them charges.
yep.
So I'm like, dude, that's expensive as fuck. You know what I mean? Like all of the cops that got sent there, they were probably getting hazard pay. You know, like we're gonna break in, take all this guy's shit. The
For
jailers,
sure.
the people at the courthouse, the judge, like all of that is gonna drag out. And I want to see what the cost is of that in comparison in the millions of dollars for, because they did it all in like one day, or maybe it was like a week, but they just raided everybody who was growing at their
So,
house and didn't have a
and
license or something. And that also pertains to, I want people to be able to grow their own, man. Like it's messed up that they did that. People are still going to jail for it when your state was the first to legalize it recreationally, you know? Like what the fuck?
well, so this is where definitions of words get really important because really what happened is we legalized it for some people, and
Yeah.
so the raids that are happening in Colorado are a window into a very bizarre world that we're getting into, where they're going to be using its enforcement mechanisms to take out black market growers as licensed growers are making millions and billions of dollars doing the same thing. And so, yes, we would do that if it was alcohol too, right? But we don't. Like, we
Well, you
don't
can
have
brew your
raids
own
on house
beer.
alcohol.
Will said took a class a couple weeks ago on how to make beer. You know what I mean? Like you can make beer
Yeah,
at your
yeah.
house.
People make beer all the time. There's no. When's the last time you heard a fucking raid on a homebrew operation?
Right, a
Yeah.
homebrew, never, right? Like,
Yeah,
come on. And
yeah.
so now, okay, because to me it's very sinister because the corporations are using millions of dollars to lobby against home grow, and then once legalization passes, they're using the state troopers and the state cops to take out their competition, right? And
See,
so like
dude.
this is bad news, man. Like, so now people that are currently, if you didn't pay up $1 million for your license or to bribe a politician, now not only like were you already at risk, but now your competition is gonna tell them they're homegrown over there, right? Because
Yeah.
you're their competition and it's their money now. It's not the same thing as if it was just a street situation, right? Where it's just a different sort of situation. But it is going to keep happening. They're going to bring in the need. They made promises when they legalized to eliminate the black market, right? And so this is why MCBA tends to not demonize the black market, and it's not about
Nah.
eliminating the black market, right? Because the black market means like people with browner skin market,
Yeah, dude.
or poorer,
We
right?
couldn't
Like,
afford the license, man. But I got a
right, right.
cousin who stays 2 states over. You know, like what the fuck?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and like it's yeah, and they made it where we couldn't afford the license on purpose. And so
Yes.
see how it's gonna play out, right? Is it's not good, man. And so I agree, like homegrown needs to be in there because of that. To be fair though, the folks that were in a lot of those raids had way beyond number of homegrown level plants that
Yeah.
they were growing, like way beyond. And
Yeah.
so, but still, we can't be calling things legalization if we're still putting people in jail, right? Like,
I
I
agree,
want to know how many
man.
people have gone to jail for illegal basil trading, right? Like, I'm sure not every
Yeah.
person that grows basil out there has the license at the farmers, and it's just it's not this is not what we do in society. We don't generally use the criminal justice system over licensing issues when it comes to produce.
I
And
agree.
so,
Well, like
so
that's my issue with the whole concept too, is like plant limit, like or supposed to. Like how many
yeah,
cases of beer can you possess? You
you
could
you
buy as
could
many
buy
as you
enough
fucking
alcohol
want.
to kill a neighborhood in one
Yeah,
shot,
you can.
situation.
You
Yeah,
fill up your whole truck, fill up your whole
sure,
van. We don't care.
sure,
Buy as much as you
sure.
want. But
Yep.
if you got weed plants, you can only have four.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
like that's
But this is the thing when we're talking about regulation, right? Because it comes up every time, and every activist will have to deal with this. You know, does a bill have to be before you'll support it or oppose it? And so, for instance, if a bill said we're going to let everybody out of prison right now for cannabis, but there's no home grow, like, would you support it?
fuck. I don't think I would.
I would. I would let the people out of prison. I think the impact of incarceration, right, is like so
But if those
bad.
guys, but if those guys can't come home and feed themselves, you know what I mean? Then that, you know, like
But it's still better than being in jail.
Yeah,
I'd
and
rather
I
who's
agree.
to say that everyone that got busted too would want to immediately jump back into,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Fair enough, guys. Fair enough.
yeah, and I think everyone would rather have the change, no matter what situation you're in. And in the reentry question, right, is the other piece of it. And so, what support are we doing for those folks that are coming out? And so the bills get really complicated. So in Connecticut, we had sort of a three-way weird situation where there was three different bills that went through three committees. One went through general law to businesses, and so that's where license. What kind of commission are we going to create to decide everything? All of that kind of good stuff. The second bill was the Judiciary Committee had a criminal justice bill to talk about expungements and letting people out of prison and what criminal justice changes were going to be in the legal. So the third one, community reinvestment bill through the finance committee that also dealt with taxation. And so we liked some pieces of some of the bills and we liked some pieces of the other ones. And it was a bit of a soup of different things. But the criminal justice piece was really weak. And so it was still going to be an arrestable offense over 2 ounces. And it was like, why we can't call that a legalization bill if you're still going to arrest people for basically nothing. And
Yeah.
so it had this weird, like, so how is an officer going to be able to know the difference between a half an ounce and 2 ounces and
Yeah.
4 ounces? Because, like, the
Depending on the
amount.
strain, too, dude. Like 2 ounces of cookies will look like a fucking half ounce of sour diesel. Like
yeah,
it just
Yeah,
fucking will, man.
yeah,
You know what I
right.
mean? Like that's
and
how it looks in the bag.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they're finding, it's like finding new ways to incarcerate people too. I
Yeah.
think I could be wrong, but I think in Washington, if you're caught with any amount over your legal limit, it's automatically a felony. Or I think maybe if you're under 21 and you're
Mm-hmm.
caught with,
All right. Yeah.
it's a felony. And
Yep.
so it's like they immediately escalated the penalty.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, we're gonna have legalization, but we're gonna make it like twice as bad now if you're 18 years old and caught with it.
Yep.
And it's just
Yep.
like kind of reworking ways to disproportionately continue to incarcerate people of color.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree, Will.
absolutely. I
Fucking
mean, look
A,
what happened
man.
in New York, right? So New York City had decriminalized it like in the 70s. But what happened later on with the Rockefeller laws, they started
Stop and
with
frisk.
the yeah, right? And so they started doing stop and frisk. Oh, what's this? This is weed. Take it out of your pocket. They take it out. Oh, now it's in public. Now you're arrested. And
Yep.
so it's so in Connecticut, and this is where again, like now the problem I have now is that it's the industry, the people profiting from it, that are wanting to increase the penalties as well, not just law enforcement. I mean, law enforcement is profiting from it, but in a very perverse way. Like this is a very like you can see the bottom line here. So in Connecticut, one of the things they tried to put in here, which is another reason we couldn't really support and push that hard this year, was that if if you got caught with marijuana under a certain amount, it wasn't illegal only if you bought it in a dispensary. And
Fuck,
so you had
dude.
to have like it in the jar. And so if I bought it or I just had it in a bag and couldn't prove it from a dispensary, it was still illegal. And we're like, wow, I wonder who wrote that part of the law. It must have been the
Yeah.
dispensaries that want to make sure that the state comes from them. So now we can like see the way the language changes. Now there's corporate cannabis lobbyists in the mix.
Damn, dude. Shit. That, like it is,
Yeah.
man. Like I agree. Like it just to me, it's messed up if people are still going to jail for weed in a legal state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's gotten bad, and as of recent in New England too, they've started, and I'm sure they've been doing this with predominantly people of color, but they're baiting people to states who have not as progressive cannabis laws, to catch them and try and catch them at a worse offense.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
Mm-hmm.
it's legal in Mass, it's legal in Maine, but Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, if you don't have a medical
Yeah.
card,
Yeah.
there's some serious offenses for it.
Mm-hmm.
And what they've been trying to do is, they don't they try and go for the full blow, and it's like, well, let's get this guy to come down to Connecticut or Rhode Island or up to New Hampshire, and let's bust him here so we can
Yeah.
get him twice as bad.
Yep.
It's
So like
just
in Connecticut, distribution. So the whole thing about like only decriminalizing possession drives me nuts because it's about distribution, intent to sell, and cultivation are economic crimes, right? And so when we're talking about we're going to allow you to, but we're not going to allow you to produce it, right? Like it's a very sinister economic system they're trying to create there. And in Connecticut, it's still 5 years mandatory minimum for selling cannabis in the wrong place, right? And it can be upwards of 10 years mandatory minimum, depending on how much it is. And so the difference between that, right? Like Holyoke, Massachusetts is like not even an hour from where I am here in Hartford, Connecticut.
that's where I'm at, right? That's where I'm
Oh,
broadcasting
really?
from right now.
See, you're
I'm
living
literally
in a
in
different,
Holyoke,
like, criminal
Massachusetts.
justice world in Holyoke, Massachusetts than in Connecticut.
Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm
If
literally.
I
Yep.
go to give
That's
you
crazy.
a bag, like it's a whole different thing. If you were to come here and give me a bag, you'd be going away from the same bag, same exchange.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yep. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that, I mean, we have a federal system, and there's pros and cons to that. But and the thing is that states like Connecticut are going to be the ones to lose out because we're going to leave, right? Like it's not an insignificant thing to not, right? Like that is a big deal. Like me thinking about work, and I'm pretty public about it at this point, but like all the different times where if somebody wanted to be an asshole about it, they could in Connecticut, that they just wouldn't be able to do the same thing in California or Massachusetts. So that's, that's a big difference in lifestyle. So it's not lost on a lot of young people in Connecticut that are leaving constantly. And so, and we're seeing Colorado is booming. Colorado population is growing. It's no joke. And yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but Connecticut states, right? I think they want those damn kids off their lawn here in Connecticut. And so the kids are going to go where the grass is greener. And right now,
man.
There's plenty
Good
of other states now.
analogy. I agree.
Another shitty thing too with the prosecution side is that as I read somewhere a while ago, but I'm sure it still holds true, is police officers much prefer to try and go after cannabis offenses, compared to like meth offenses, people using crack, cocaine, because it's just like, they don't like to deal with like, someone super like fucked up, high on meth, that, and it's easy. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, let's get some kids, someone smoking weed, it's fun. And it's shitty that kind of mentality is something that I'm sure happens across the board.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's bullying, man.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so the role of police in society is to be a bully. So if you want to be a police officer, you're probably going to be somebody that had bullying tendencies, and now you want to do it professionally. And so to help you, like, just I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice, but the truth is the police are never there to help you. They're there to arrest people, right? And that is what their role is. And so if arresting people makes the situation safer, they'll do that. If arresting people makes the situation not as safe, they'll do that too. They'll do whatever they need to keep their job, And so it's unfortunate, but that's what we have done to police in this country. I mean, police have never been a great institution from the beginning, but we definitely now have given them so much power that they feel very invincible and above the law themselves. And so when you put people with bullying tendencies in a place where they will themselves be held accountable, you know, guaranteeing a lot of our communities are going to have a bad time, at least just by the way we shape who and what they are in society.
I agree, dude, man. So much, yes, Jason. Goddamn. Okay, so I I want to try and go for at least an hour, a little bit longer if you can. I just want to
Mhm.
share with anybody who's listening live. If you guys want to call in and ask any questions of Jason Ortiz, call in. 1-800 number is 1-833-777-3227. That's 1-833-777-DABS.
Nice.
Shout out to
Pay extra
Mitchell
for that
for
one.
Mitchell hooked it up. Shout out to Mitchell Wilson. He's over there in the production booth there holding it down. He's the one who picked that.
I
Real
saw him
cool
snacking on
cat.
some pizza earlier.
Yeah, he's man, that's my homie, man. I love that guy.
One thing I wanted to just comment on earlier is earlier you guys shared some stories of smoking herb and getting caught by the cops and
Yep.
getting charges and stuff, and
Mhm.
just the point of like white privilege and how people it's very unnoticed in society. It's like I was caught. I got caught back in high school, hot boxing a car stupidly right out front of my fucking friend's house, right outside. We could have just done it in the backyard, but we're like, oh, let's go in the car and got caught there, and the cop just fucking took our weed and told us, hey, get out of here or whatever. And it's like that 100% would not have happened, if to a person of color. And it's just
not on my res, bro.
no, and it's just it's really unfortunate that people don't see that in everyday life and how it shapes things. And I feel like if more people had their eyes open to it, it's kind of hard to unsee it. And
I
it's
agree.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think there are a lot of willfully ignorant folks out there that
definitely,
man.
presented with the information, will make
Absolutely.
whatever excuses, So, but I mean,
Yeah.
it is true that different, selective enforcement is real. Different communities are treated very differently, and it is a matter like bullies pick on the people they think are going to be less likely to defend themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a big part. It's also why it's really class based, right? A lot of poor folks end up in prison, and a lot of folks that have serious mental health issues end up in prison also because they can't really defend themselves in a serious way. And so both of those groups still provide the same amount of money to the private prison, right? And so they know how many people they need to keep in to make whatever dollars they promise their shareholders. Right? And so like those numbers get part of the system. And so so I mean that's why if you're an officer and you have to make X amount of arrests by the end of the month, you don't want to be going into seriously dangerous situations 30 times or 40 times or whatever it is. But you could stop once a week and you'll find somebody, that will add up to whatever it is that you need to do. And so it's unfortunate because it's like so preying on the weak and for what, right? Like it's just the thing is terrible every step of the way. And it's what makes it so frustrating that people still want to keep doing it. It's like it's so obviously damaging everybody. Middle class family, what ends up with middle class family? Their kid gets arrested. They're worried about their reputation. So what do? Pay a lawyer a lot of money to go make it go away. And so there are families that have, freaked out because they don't want their kids to be barred from college and from getting a job. And so they'll shell out a lot of money to make a simple possession charge go away. And that's that mom has to work an extra shift on the weekends now. That dad has to, change how they're going to pay the mortgage in order to just make this thing happen right now. And so families have been crippled economically just out of the fear what a charge could do to you, because it is a real fear. It's like, it's valid. Like, you should be worried
Yeah.
because it can ruin,
Well,
a lot of
that was my
opportunities.
thing,
Yeah.
dude. When I got my charge, it was my senior year, like the first semester. So I had to play the game of trying to
Right,
get
right,
continuances in court
right.
until I
Delay it
got to
until you
that second
graduate. Yeah.
semester. Yeah, and then once
Mhm.
I got my second semester funding, it was like in August. I pled guilty in September, got sentenced in October, graduated in December, and then I went to jail on, I think, New Year's Day or something in
So
January.
ridiculous.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
it was a bummer, man, and but I was thankful that I was still able to complete my education, but dude, it was basically rendered worthless as soon as I, went to jail.
And
It's
for
like,
doing
this is on your
something
record.
that in Colorado they're doing to the scale of billions of dollars and building
Yeah.
schools with it, right? So like,
Yeah.
we're gonna kick kids, like, in one state. This is the world we live in. In one state, they will kick you out of school for possession of cannabis. Where right up the road, this is probably true of Massachusetts and Connecticut, right? In Connecticut, you will get kicked out of school for possession of cannabis. In Massachusetts, they're gonna be building schools with cannabis money. And that is the, like, most intense hypocrisy of our country, like, ever. And
Yeah.
it's wild. Hell, man. Like, I'm glad I have cannabis in my life to keep me calm, cool, and collective over it, because it's so
Yes.
absurd. Like,
Yes.
like, the only thing that keeps it, manageable is being able to smoke with other folks that are doing good work and trying to change this ridiculousness.
I agree, Jason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
The other thing too they're doing now is, well, they've been doing this for a while, but is with the like cannabis is their they have minimum, they've been doing a lot in a lot of states, like, yeah, it's legal under this amount if you don't have this, but if you exceed it and on the second offense or something, you
Yeah,
have to
yeah, yeah.
serve a minimum of 45 days in jail or something,
Right, right.
minimum. So there's
Yep.
no way that people can avoid it. and it's just like, is this what legalization is? Like, rewriting laws like this to serve this purpose? Like,
Yep.
Hell
Yep.
yeah.
And that's the big thing with law. Because we can all agree the status quo is untenable, and we do not want the status quo to continue. But what are we willing to give up in order to get what? Right. And so if we're too purist about it, it's just going to stay the same, right? Like, unfortunately, in Connecticut, it's just going to be exactly the same, just as shitty as it was last year for the next couple of years now because of it. And so, but in Chicago, for instance, like, they did fight for a pretty good bill and did make progress. And so they tried to get rid of home grow, then the advocates fought back. And so now patients have home grow, and regular customers, home grow is just a ticketable offense. And so if you do have cultivation like under 20 plants or something like that, it's a $200 fine.
Oh,
And
good.
so,
I didn't even read up on that.
it's like,
Thanks
that's
for
cool.
sharing that,
technically
bro.
not home grow 100%, right? But like pretty
Right,
close,
That's
man, right? And
that's
the patients got it.
workable. Fair.
So,
Like,
but
shit, I got here's $200. You know what I mean? Like, that's
Yeah,
fair.
just keep an emergency fund.
Yeah.
Just in case.
That's an
I'm
ounce
just
a week,
saying, like,
basically. You
I
know
would
what I mean?
accept that deal.
Hell
Definitely.
yeah.
Definitely.
But that's what, when you're writing legislation or you're working with elected officials, right? It's that dance that determines the whole conversation, right? And so you're going to say at the beginning, this is non-negotiable. This is, I'm like, I don't really care that much about this. And that's going to set this for what is possible. And so learning and deciding how you're going to push different ways and where you're going to give a little bit here in order to get there is what it's all about. And so for MCBA, we want to draft policies so that the starting point of the conversation is in our field where we're the strongest. And so for a long time, we were always just saying no to other people's bad bills. But when they say, well, what would you do instead? We didn't have anything to put it in its place. And so we would lose that argument every single time. And you can't just have anything better. And so we decided to start drafting model legislation that was, from us, what would the ideal situation be? What would be the market? If I was president, how would I design the cannabis industry? Right? And start from there. And then as we negotiate, you tell me why no to my ideas then now. Right? And you got to tell me a better idea than the one I did if you tell me no. And
Yes,
so that
dude.
changes the conversation completely, right? And so
Excellent strategy, bro.
right. It's one piece of the strategy, but yeah, but that, it definitely made things a very different conversation. We could have a conversation for position. I very understand cannabis law better than the legislators that are going to have to write it. And so when you're in that situation and you're having conversations with folks in that way, you become an asset to the like champions, the folks that want to actually make it happen, and you can see your ideas put into law. And so if you were to look at the general law bills in Connecticut language, there's a ton of equity language in there, and there's no doubt about it. We were the ones that made sure it got put in there. And so we didn't get the bill done, but in Chicago and in Illinois, they did. Right? And so they did. They used a lot of our similar language that we've shared across the country. It's not MCBA specific. This is just like and got it done. There's a $50 million equity fund to provide loans to people that have been impacted by the war on drugs to start businesses. Like that's real in Illinois. That fund is going to exist and change the game because now it's a standard. Hopefully, going to make it standard for the rest of the country. But that's because advocates fought. The home grow thing was because advocates vocally and publicly fought about it and won. So it's not
Very cool.
always, the right move to give in, but sometimes it is a little bit, right? Like, hey, we didn't
Yeah.
get a perfect home grow, but we got a $50 million equity loan fund. Like,
Well,
deal,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
I
And
agree.
so,
Well, that's why I think too. I want to like say my opinion on this too. Like
sure,
I have a lot of friends online who say, "Man, I don't vote because it doesn't count." Okay, maybe in
yeah.
certain instances for the president, yeah, it doesn't count. But if there's weed legalization on the ballot in your state or your county, then if you vote yes, that vote counts, man. You know,
Voting
legal
always
Sure.
counts.
in the state that I live in because
That's
the
because you're in
voter the
Massachusetts. You got ballot measures in
what
Massachusetts.
dude,
So.
Right.
yeah,
Well, I
and
do
it's
live in Oregon actually, but
Oh, you're Oregon. Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
well, I mean,
I've been out
even
here
so,
for it.
too. Yeah.
Right.
The Connecticut, it doesn't always feel that way, but I think
Yeah.
you're never just voting for president. Whenever you go to vote, there's usually your state reps, your city council people, or whatever, also on the ballot, and so those folks are going to determine a lot of what the laws in your state or neighborhood will be, and so that's why. So we created a statewide bill, a model state bill. We also created a model municipal for a city council board of selectmen to use, and so anyone in the country can go to minoritycannabis.org and look at municipal ordinance and then bring it to your city council and say, we want to have cannabis industry in our town. And we want it with equity. This is how we should do it. City council, some people will, and some people will be not so happy with you, right? And so you'll know very quickly who your supporters on the city council are not. And you can find them. And you only need one real champion on your city council to introduce legislation for you. And then you get to be the one determine how your town is going to regulate cannabis businesses in your neighborhood. Hey, we want infinite number of businesses. You can say we want only cultivation. You can say we want to have only manufacturing. It'll be 5 retail outlets and they'll all be in this one part of town, or 10 retail outlets and spread out, right? Like you get to be the person to determine that. And so we always encourage folks to start there, start as local as possible, find folks there. Because if you can get a movement going in one town, that'll spread to the other one. And that's how you'll be able to move big chunks of votes in your legislature. If you can have, groups of legislators that are now representing cities that have passed ordinances to legalize.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's wondering, how do I get started? Take that policy, bring it to your city council meeting, and just say the word marijuana 5 times, and you'll see who laughs and who gets annoyed, and then go talk to the people who smile, and there'll be people that are interested in helping you out. Usually.
Yeah, and any listening and is inspired to do exactly what he's saying, you can hit up the website minoritycannabis.org and they have all the materials right there that you can print
it's
out.
under what we do. I think it's who we are and what we do is drop downs.
Yeah, I dig the drop down menus, bro. Easy.
Yeah,
Like,
we even have we have a number of cool
yeah.
videos that you can go and check out that show the process we're doing it. And our most recent press release is translated into Spanish, So if you want to
Awesome.
get a better idea, yeah. So we're actually Jasmine Aguilar from LA, who shout out to Jasmine, true champ in the movement, is going to be helping us translate the municipal ordinance in Spanish. And
Oh,
so
dude, that's so
yeah, I mean, so
sick.
I've
We need to
never
do that in
translated laws
AZ,
and
bro, because there's so many Spanish people down here who could really turn the vote on that if they could read the language,
exactly.
you know?
Exactly. And if they can actually read the law, it changes their ability to interact with the movement. Right. Like it's like I can't read a law,
Yeah.
right? Like if you ask me to go advocate for a law and the law's in German, I can't help you. Right. And so being able to put laws in the languages that people actually speak is super important. And so that's why having Latinos and that speak Spanish in the movement is so important. They can open the doors to entire communities to me. And so, I was recently invited to go speak in Bogota, Colombia, too. And so, before this podcast is over, I just want to put it out there, the idea that we have to start thinking about international equity and what does it mean to give back to the Latin American countries that were by the war on drugs in a national context, and what does equity in a country to country way really mean? Think about it, it's really like an individual justice sense, right? It's a very different thing. We started thinking
Yeah.
about the U.S. government and the damage that the government did to Colombia, to Nicaragua, to Mexico. Like,
Yeah,
it's a
bro.
lot, right? And
Yeah.
so we got to have to grapple with that and have to, have national meetings, policy. Maybe someday we'll draft a treaty that can be between two countries for the creation and export of cannabis. Two countries, right? And so we actually saw Ghana made a deal with Germany recently to export a tremendous amount of cannabis. And so the cannabis
Nice.
industry is so beyond just the United States. As complicated and fucked up as the United States is, world is a big place, and they
Yeah.
all China, Russia, all of them consume
And
cannabis.
we be growing bomb. We be growing
Ret-
bomb outdoors in Oregon, man.
Uh-huh.
retributions.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it gets the scale of the conversation gets awesome in all the best and complicated ways, right? And so that's where we have to think about how does the UN talk about end drugs, right? And what kind of
Yeah.
community
No
we're gonna
doubt.
give, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot there, and so we need everybody involved to help us figure it out.
Word, word. Okay, so I man, I didn't need very many of these cookie cutter questions. We kind of talked about that already, like the trans, negative, and I want to go to my last three. I know it's late out there. It's got to be what, midnight out there now? Damn.
Yeah, well
Oh
past
man,
midnight.
All right. Well, I
the
got
work
three
never
more.
stops.
I got three more questions, and then we
That's
can
why I
wrap
only
it
smoke
up. And
sativas, man.
well, dude, Will's out there too, and I can tell Will gets tired towards the end.
No, I'm good tonight. I admit I was
Yeah,
a little tired on the last one.
yeah. Okay. My next cookie cutter question is: what are some of your goals in your current position?
Wow. Well, so
Like
the
usually this
company.
pertains to business guys, but it's different with you. So you
Right,
got
right. Yeah. So
personal
I'll
ones.
say, the short version is to get a cultivation manufacturing license in Puerto Rico. That's the short version, right? And so that is 100%. Like, I make no apologies for that whatsoever. Like, that's the goal. But beyond that, I do think that the equity movement is in a very particular place, both nationally and internationally right now, that like we can't drop the ball because the federal level laws are being made. The banking bill is looking like it's going to get included basically in the most recent budget, and so we have to figure out how we're going to out both community investment and business opportunities at the federal and international level. And so for me, I'd like to see MCBA be able to grow our capacity to have people in all these places. And so right now we're in all volunteer, mostly we have time staff members, but mostly volunteer. And so for me, it's being able to bring on executive directors and communications directors and blah, that we actually back because there's some really awesome opportunities. So like the press very much loves the conversation and likes to highlight our work. There's a number of professional athletes and musicians and different that are definitely in line with our mission and values. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us out there to do it. Me, I'd like to see us tap into that to the point where, maybe we can help craft the legalization law that happens at the national level. And what does that look like? And so I think for me, the next big goal is going to be to have a Latino summit, actually. So specifically, while there are lots of different people of color in the cannabis industry, a lot of the owners are African. And so there's not as many Latinos specifically. And so I feel like that space hasn't been explored to support directly, and I want to help make that happen. And so I think that's why going to PR is going to be a big help for that. But, like California, Texas, a lot of the South, Mexico, as you start to look internationally, there's going to need a lot of Spanish language help in what we're doing. So for me, I'd like to see some kind of big Latino specific focus summit happen in the United States in the next year or so. And I think that would go a long way to bringing those communities on board. And a lot of times now, the faith-based Latinos are the strongest opposition.
I agree.
Or one of the strongest.
I agree. The aunties and grandmas of my SA homies really don't like us smoking weed even in the backyard. You know what I mean? I'm like, we're in the fucking.
And the thing is, they're very vocal about it too. Right. So so when I was organizing, I would always get outnumbered by the old Puerto Ricans. It was like, they were effective. I will give it to them, and they have their churches and their little groups, and they do their thing, and they have a good time with it. And I respect the hustle, right? Like, hey, that's what you believe. I get it. I'm not mad at you about it. But the fact of the matter is, the grandmas will out hustle the stoners 9 times out of 10. And that's, the stoners are getting a bit better at it now than we were before. And so we're a little more effective, but they got numbers and a lot of time in their hands and can make calls more than we will. And we are managing that, like retirees are not with us, but that is why. So like Nelson Guerrero of the Cannabis Cultural Association, which you all should check out, the Cannabis Cultural Association, he did great work. But he did a video where he introduced his grandfather to cannabis, help with a number of ailments, and documented that experience. And so bringing on our abuelos y abuelitas, is going to be important to getting us finally over the hill, where not only can we just legalize, but we can get their support to do it the right way. And make sure our communities, because they are very concerned about the neighborhood, right? The local community, as am I when it comes to who's going to own it. They don't want to see big tobacco, big alcohol, but they say, do I? Right? Like, I don't want to see that either. And so we have to figure out a way to communicate those shared concerns and shared values into policy in a way that makes everybody happy. And I think we can, because it is the same concerns. We don't want to see the big corporations come in and take us out, getting children or anything like that, or just economically pushing people. So it's going to be up to us, the young people, to explain it in a way that the generation come around.
Yeah, mom and pop's got to eat still, man, and that's not really the way it's going in Oregon. Mom and pops are crumbling, because they can't last the 2 or 3 years until it's federally legal and they can export. Like, they're sitting on 100 packs right now and can't sell it to the stores because,
right,
like each pack they might have spent $250, $350 to produce, but stores are only buying it for $500. And it's from last year or 2 years ago. So it's like,
right, and you start having to turn to
oil. Yeah,
it gets messy. Yep.
Yeah, man, it's a bummer. I don't want to tell my friend's story because I want him to come on the podcast in the future. But I had a buddy who I was really inspired by. He went and bought some property in Vernonia, and I didn't see him for like a year. And I saw him at a party, like a cannabis harvest party. And I was like, "What's up in Vernonia?" I was excited. He was like, "You see all this free swag, all the stickers and stuff? I don't want to say the company or anything." And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's me." I'm like, "Oh, that's your company?" He's like, "No, I work for those guys." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Dude, they have $7 million." He's like, I probably had like 150, 175, to work with. He's I can't compete with that. And he's like, and then the regulations changed to where you could only have 48 plants per medical grow, and then they changed a year later to where if you had more than 12 plants, you had to get the seed to sale tracking system market uses. So it's just like
Mm-hmm.
everybody, like, dude, that's what made me just flake out. I'm like, I
Yeah.
in addition to using the seed to sale tracking system, medical growers could only sell 20 pounds to the rec dispensaries. So it's like
Hmm.
we get to use your tracking system, but we can only sell this many. Like, how are we gonna feed our business
Right. Right.
off of 20 pounds in a year, dude? Like, we can't live
In a
off of
year?
that.
I think
Yeah,
like in
dude.
one transaction. Yeah, that's not
No,
that
in a
much.
year, bro. In a year.
In a
So it's like,
year.
how are you gonna, like, that's it's impossible to do. And shout out to Mitchell. He said it's also another barrier to entry. Like,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. It is for sure.
you
Well, and
know,
that's
and
why I think like it's only really possible if you're planning on also being like a super prominent, active organizer and active, because the way how quickly the laws can change in a way that will destroy certain businesses is like lightning fast these days.
yeah,
And
it,
so,
it's every 3 months in Oregon they would change, and that's what the mom and pops had. That's why I could always get a job because I could read
Mhm,
the 80 pages in a
mhm,
weekend and say, "Yo, we got to change this." And they're like, "Why?" I'm like,
mhm.
"It's right here. This is why." And they're like, "Wow, you're really smart." So I'm like, "Man, I like to read a lot, but I want to win at this game, so I want you guys to win too." Like,
Yeah,
it would just
yeah. I mean, my
every
approach was
like
the right.
lightning fast is right, Jason. Every 3 months, new rules
Mhm,
come out. Your packaging has to be different now. Now you have to put this on the label. Now you have to put this on the label. Now you can only sell this much to a rec customer. Now you can sell
mhm,
this
mhm.
much to it. Like, dude, like, it's very difficult to adapt to that as a business. If you're
Yep.
investing money into every change, the
Mhm.
money that you invested into packaging to be compliant 3 months ago might not be compliant 3 months from now. So you just wasted
Yep.
20,000 bucks.
Yep. And new product cycles that are pretty long, right? It takes a while from seed to chocolate bar. So, yeah, man, it's a mess. That's all there is to it. It's all over the place. And we got to keep advocating to, keep those barriers low. But it's been an uphill battle, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Okay, so we got
Speaking
a
of chocolate
question.
bar,
Yeah,
Yeah. See?
we got a question from Jesse on production. He says, "What's the main reason for the speed of all the rule changes?" I feel like it's by design to get the mom and pops out so that big can come in.
I mean, I think there's a lot going on. Like, there's people who are making so they have to change them. And so if you rush through it in the beginning and you put arbitrary numbers on different things, you will often have to change it later. And so I think that's part of it. It's just that people have a lot of interest groups vie for what they want and will tell them to write different things and have unintended consequences. And so I think that's part of it. But part of it is, as with any industry, people will try to use their influence and money to legislate an advantage for themselves. And they're not shy about it. And so it
Yeah,
will go on forever like that. The big companies will always use their money to try to make it hard to compete with them. And that's just part of doing business in the United States. It's just, part of being in a capitalist world. Capitalism favors those that have a lot of capital.
yep, I agree, man. That's the biggest barrier to entry for me. It's like, well,
Of
because
all time, man.
I could afford the license. It was only 5,000 bucks to get the rec license,
Mhm.
but it's like the other requirements for and you had to have on payroll because it's like I could work for free for a year and it's just gonna be me doing the work anyway. So, and even
well,
that it didn't matter. You have to have payroll. You have to have all of this stuff too. So it's like, man, I
Mhm.
can't I can't afford that without an investor.
yeah, those excluded license fees too. Even they predate legalization. It's like some boards coming on, or some states coming on board with, even just the medical program, like Washington, D.C., you can't even, no one licensed unless you had $600,000. And, it's like, same with Hawaii, you had to have $1 million for medical out there, and extensive application. They have like an extensive application process, and just a process that, like we were talking about earlier, really favors the privileged.
Yeah,
it's
true, 100%.
Okay, so I got 2 more cookie cutter questions, Jason. I know it's getting late. What sort of ideas or concepts would you like to promote in the future?
People drafting their own laws. That's the number one thing I think that I would like to promote, and what I try to promote is you don't have to be a lawyer to do it, but write it how you want it and talk about that. Arguing about, no, we're against this. If it doesn't have this thing, then we have to kill this. It's part of the conversation, but ultimately, if you don't have a better system to suggest, you're going to lose the argument. And that's where we have to be as a community. Like, what does community-centered cannabis legalization look like? And get a group of people together to draft it and bring it to a city council or a state legislator and talk about it. I think that's the number one thing. But also, that
community-centered cannabis legislation.
That's right. Absolutely.
And
you're the community, right? Like,
that was what I was. Keep going, bro.
If you're looking for examples, go to minoritycannabis.org. Check out the videos of how we did it. We're all about that. But I think, the more people we have writing their own laws and sharing them, right? Like, when you're advocating for your policies, share them and tag local officials and ask them, hey, what do you think of this policy? I think another thing that you can always do is, if you're not sure how to, where to get started, to look at other cities and other states that have legalization and just, right? So if you look at Oakland, California's equity program, if you look at Massachusetts and what they've done, you can look in Denver and Colorado. There's examples out there. So, give it a shot. Get some people together, roll a couple big ones up, and, dig into the policy like a bunch of data nerds that we are, and come up with some better policies, right? Like, all you're doing is looking at, how can we make this better? How can we make this more inclusive? How can we lower the barriers to entry? And are there any vulnerabilities that are not being protected when we normally draft these policies? And so folks that live in public housing, environmental concerns, right? Like, whatever is important to you, make it an issue, and it may get addressed when folks start talking about legalization in a more legislative way. We're talking specific policies, but there will always be some champion out there on this. Like, legalization is a popular issue, and so finding your champion, I think, is the next recommendation. I would say is, whatever city council you have, whatever state representatives you have, find somebody that has really developed a relationship with them in a way that they can introduce your bills for you. And so you're operating from a position of real political power. And so once you decide what you want, right? So the crafting of public policy is really answering the question of, what do we want? And that is a simple question stated. That is a very complicated question to answer. Are we talking wants versus needs? Who decides who we are? Are we including everybody, or just a particular group of everybody? And so that's a very complicated process, but that's what the policy summits of MCBA try to answer, right? Try to get consensus on that, answer the question of what we want. But then once you figure that out, you got to have somebody actually introduce that into law. And so you got to find a champion. And so you can bring up the issue, go speak at, your city council for public comment. Just about every city council has some amount of public comment time. And I would start there. And then, once you got yourself a champion and you know what you want, call up MCBA and we'll see how we can help.
Hell yeah, dude. Very cool. So I guess minoritycannabis.org, but can you also plug your social media or any other websites that you're trying to promote? Anything Puerto Rico, whatever,
Sure. So minoritycannabis.org. Yeah. So minoritycannabis.org. There's a number of great other organizations. If there are women of color out there, Supernova Women in the Bay Area in California is pretty fantastic. I would also encourage everyone to follow Shalene Title, who's a cannabis commissioner of Massachusetts, was a former board member of MCBA, who does fantastic work explaining to the public why equity is important. So I would definitely tell folks to follow her. She does a lot of
Say her name
Instagram
one more time.
Live. And
Say her name one more
Shalene Title.
Can you spell it?
So it's SHALEENT and then Title TITLE.
Okay, cool.
And so, and Shalene, and there's also Chanel, Massachusetts, who's on the advisory committee. But I would follow both of them because they have very concrete policy recommendations, and I mean very concrete, and that'll get you acquainted with some of the bigger concerns. And so you can find them both on Facebook. Yeah, so figure out what you want, and then you get it, and that's basically the game plan.
Awesome. Well, Jason, we really appreciate you coming on the show, man. It was we were tripping out on how we were gonna, it's supposed to be about regulation. I'm like, I don't think anybody from OLCC or AZDHS is really gonna call me back, And a couple of guys did, but they're just like, no, we're not gonna do that.
They're too scared.
And so, yeah, and so it was just like, and so Mitchell, his girlfriend, had somebody who was writing their dissertation or whatever on the environmental impacts, for outdoor growth and everything.
Yep,
Like,
the whole problem.
Cool.
Cannabis plants take a lot of water.
Yeah, so we're gonna have her on a separate episode, but we were able to book you for this episode, and you.
Right on, man. Well, I appreciate y'all putting the good word out there and getting people involved, and
yeah,
we need as much as we can get.
Shout out to Cody Riggers, man, because that was the connection on this. Yeah, like, man, she's from Flores. We went to school with her. Yeah, man. So it just, you really killed it, bro. Like, it was everything I hope for, everything I hope for, and more.
Trying to make policy a little more interesting than just words on a page.
No doubt, man. We appreciate it a lot. Hopefully we can have you on the podcast again in the future, and do a follow-up interview. Hopefully,
absolutely. I'd like to have a conversation one of these days about policy, specifically when it comes to Native American land, because I'm not super well versed in it. It's a few times, and so I need to understand tribal law better. But next podcast, we should do that one.
I'm down, dude. I'll send you some links to read about too. I worked for a Native dispensary owner in Portland. He's from my tribe too, Jackson McCormick. He's a Native business owner, natural wonders. That's how I met Will. So yeah,
nice.
It's
hit us up with MCBA. Let us know how we can help them out, man. Like, we love to highlight folks that are doing good stuff all around the country.
Dude, I will totally do that. Rolling right now, and he's gonna back up sometime this month, man. Like in a week or two, I think. So.
Oh wow, nice. That would be awesome. Right, sweet.
I will bug him and call him and tell him to hit up the website.
Yeah, man, for sure. Because we can get him some press.
Yeah, content is good, man. Shine is good, especially
right on, man.
Color cannabis.
Yeah. We gotta work together.
Yeah, man.
All right, man. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and I'm happy to come back on.
All right, dude. Have a good rest of your night, man.
Right.
I will.
Thanks, Jason.
Peace, y'all.
Yeah.
Talk soon. Bye.
Yep. All right. Is there anything you want to add at the end for the outro, Will? Like, do you have anything to add? Like, I thought he was.
I don't think so.
Yes. He was an awesome guest, dude. I'm glad we got him.
Yeah, that was great.
All right, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and do my outro dance. This was the 7th episode of Concerned Dabs podcast, talking about regulation with Jason Ortiz from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. I have been your host, KDM Kane. With me was my co-host, Will Terps. I got to give a shout out to my guys in production, Mitchell Wilson and Jesse Curry. This has been a Main Node and Joseph Street Enterprise production.